From the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, and beaming out across all of space and time, this is Star Talk, where science and pop culture collide. I'm your host, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and here's my intrepid co-host, Eugene Merman. Eugene, thanks for being back on Star Talk.
It is great to be back.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. So you still doing stand-up around town?
Still doing stand-up around
now
town.
You're seated. You're doing sit-down here.
Right now, for this, yes. But normally I would stand because I'm a gentleman.
So we're featuring my interview with Biz Stone. He's one of the co-founders of Twitter.
Oh.
Twitter has a huge impact on society, not only in social media, but also in... It's moving entire cultures to communicate as one. And I don't want to have that conversation about culture and social media without getting some expertise. Alondra Nelson, welcome back to Star Talk.
It's great to be back.
We've had you before.
Yes.
Excellent. And so you're professor of
sociology
up at Columbia University. So we'll be coming back to you many times in this conversation.
Great.
Because social media is a sociological phenomenon.
Absolutely.
And you share common word roots there.
Absolutely.
So just be ready for this.
Okay, bring it on.
And not only that, Clive Thompson, welcome to Star Talk.
Good to be here.
So Clive, you're a journalist with the New York Times?
New York Times Magazine and Wired Magazine.
And Wired Magazine, and how long have you been you're a professional journalist?
I've been writing about social media and the internet for about 20 years now. Really since it sort of became the internet.
Yeah, I didn't know it was that 20 years ago.
Well,
so what the hell were you writing about 20 years ago?
Email.
I am the lone person on earth with an email account. I will be a professor on this. I will be the head of that division of the New York Times.
And another thing about Netscape.
Exactly.
And so we're talking about Twitter. So it's 2005, and Biz Stone is working with some of his partners. One of them is Jack Dorsey on a podcasting company called Odeo. You ever heard of Odeo? Yeah, because it didn't do very well. No, and it's not doing well, and they try to think up something else. And they come up with an idea that would ultimately become Twitter. So I had to ask him, what is the genesis of this? What is the backstory of Twitter? Check it out.
Jack and I teamed up, and he took me over to his desk, and he said, do you see here on my AOL Instant Messenger chat, you know, back when we used to use MSN chat or AOL chat or whatever, you could see your friend's name and whether or not they were online or offline, that was their status. But you could also write whatever you wanted in there. And some people were offline, online, listening to the White Stripes, feeling like crap, I hate Mondays.
Right, this is the status that would go out to someone who's trying to chat with you.
Yeah.
And so they would know what your state of being is.
Right. And so Jack said, take a look at this. I got 12 people on here, and I don't even have to ask them, and I know what they're thinking. Look, this guy's having a bad day. I didn't even have to ask him. And I was like, and he said to me, he said,
and people are automatically keeping it short because it's just a quick...
It's just a quick thing. And so Jack said, you've built networks before. You built one of the early social networks. You worked on Blogger, all this stuff. Do you think we can make a whole thing out of just this? And I was like, yeah, let's do it because that's simple.
So he's talking about Jack Dorsey, which was one of his co-founders at the beginning of that. So this idea, and I remember that, seeing these little notices, what are you up to, or what are you not up to? And if you have a friend and you're curious, these are info bits. And Alondra, isn't this voyeuristic? And is that good or bad or neutral?
It's not voyeuristic if you're putting it out there, right? So you're making a kind of...
Is it voyeuristic for me to want to know this about you?
We all want to know that about each other. I mean, you know, we're all social animals. We don't sniff each other like some of the other animals do, but I mean, we try.
Sometimes it's fine, and sometimes it's inappropriate.
But we're curious about each other.
It's exactly true.
We're curious about each other. We people watch.
Right.
I mean, you can spend...
You seeing a status update is like sniffing their butt.
I didn't say that.
Yes, you did. I think that's a brilliant analogy. Just sniffing someone, it's because smell comes at a distance,
yep.
And you get to know what they're doing or what their circumstances are. That's a brilliant analogy. Please continue.
I just think that we're curious about each other. There's a reason why you can while away many hours sitting in a mall, watching people walk by, sit on the subway, watch people, sit at the beach, watch people, because we're inherently interesting, and it's not voyeuristic if people are out in public space, and there's not much more public than putting out to the world, to 10,000 or half a billion users, that, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm feeling right now.
Twitter can enhance social interactions and also bring down governments. And so let me ask you something. In between there's other things that have happened with Twitter. Twitter has become a news source. Clive, you're a journalist. You will definitely get scooped by a story if someone's got a Twitter account and they see something that you might be interested in. We learned about Michael Jackson's death first on Twitter. When the plane was plunked down in the Hudson, someone tweeted, "I just saw a plane crash in the Hudson."
It's called sometimes citizen journalism, but it's quite powerful, and it's very fast and much faster than traditional media.
Is it only an issue of speed as opposed to whether a phenomenon would happen at all? Alondra, could you have a revolution such as the Arab Spring without Twitter?
Sure, we've had revolutions before without Twitter, but they happen.
Name one.
I don't know, the French Revolution, the American Revolution.
They didn't have Twitter?
One was enough for me, but I believe you now.
So surely it can happen without Twitter.
Let me repose the question
Sure.
then. Yes, we've had revolutions with and without Twitter. Are the revolutions triggered by Twitter of a different social nature than the ones that are not, that have not been?
Indeed, because the whole world is watching, right, or reading on their screen, right? So they're watching videos, they're seeing images that are on their timelines, and people are also reading about it.
That happened in 1968 Democratic Convention. The whole world is watching. The whole world is watching. You had the militarized police outside.
Right.
So,
but everyone didn't have television in 1968. I mean, the penetration of Twitter, you talk about 500 million users, means that there are people all over the world who are watching this and experiencing this in real time together.
So is it just a sped up revolution, or is the nature of the revolution different?
It's sped up news of a revolution. Whether or not a revolution ever happens, I think depends on what's happening on the ground. So Twitter is one piece, I think, of social action that can lead to a revolution.
So we can ask, what is the responsibility of such an efficient media communicative source?
That's a hard call. I mean, they have algorithms. They have the ability to censor hashtags that are gaining popularity or not, as is their want. The people, the programmers, the programmers who create the algorithms. The people in charge of Twitter.
Trends all about Justin Bieber if they didn't censor stuff.
So there are ethical issues that arise with how Twitter is used and how news is disseminated and what choices are made.
Because I had to ask Biz Stone, co-founder of Twitter, what he thought about people referring to these revolutions as Twitter revolutions. Check it out.
We were getting lumped into the headlines with every important thing that was going on in the world. But I made sure to tell people at Twitter, because the newspapers were calling it the Twitter revolution and all this stuff. I said, it's not the Twitter revolution. You gotta keep in mind, everybody, that these people are bleeding in the streets. These people are dying. They reached for the closest tool. And we happen to be—
So it's not even about Twitter.
We happen to be there at the right place, right time, but let's not say to ourselves, we're doing this. So I was getting invited to go on all these, evening talk shows and all this stuff, and I said, no, this would be inappropriate. First of all, I don't know anything about what's going on, so I'm gonna look like an idiot.
They'll ask you to comment on international politics.
What do I know about it?
Right.
Second of all, these people are dying and bleeding and suffering
and desperate.
And I'm not gonna hawk my wares on the back of that. So I wrote but at the same time, I was getting sort of pressure from my board, like, hey man, you gotta go on these shows, and we've gotta grow and are you some kind of idiot? And I was kind of stuck because
the board has to do what boards do, and that's
maximize
grow the
value.
company,
Yeah.
right? And so what did you do?
So I felt that I shouldn't. My gut told me don't go on these shows, but I also didn't want to piss off all these media folks because I do want to go on the shows later, and I do want to hype up the product and get the brand out there and everything else. So I lucked out with one word. I chose one word that was the appropriate word, which was inappropriate. I said, I feel it would be inappropriate for me to come on the program and talk about this. And that worked because I got back universally another one-word answer from a lot of these producers was understood. And so I was like, yes, that worked. Because later on I did go on all the shows, but for brighter, sunnier things. And I didn't obviously it was inappropriate. And anyone who at the time was going on there and claiming that they're, I said, yeah, the Berlin Wall, when the Berlin Wall fell, were telephones used? Yes. Did AT&T say, we brought down the Berlin Wall? Right. No, but were phone calls made? Sure.
Yeah, that's, after that comment, I fell in love with the guy. I mean, that was noble, it was righteous, it was humble, it was...
That's why they call him Biz Stone.